Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar today. We have a new exciting Ask a Reseller webinar program for you, and we have one of our resellers, Gary, on the phone. I'm Chad Hill, and I'm joined by Adam Stetzer and our team up in Rochester.
Yeah, good afternoon, Chad. We're staying warm. I got the whole team here. Why don't we say hello? Hey. We're excited to hear what Gary has to say for us today, Chad.
Awesome. And Gary, of course, welcome to our webinar today. It's a real pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
Awesome. So our agenda for today, we've got a set of questions that we reviewed with Gary that we thought would provide some of the insight that a lot of you have asked, and we had some responses come in over the last week where people have asked specific questions. So hopefully we've included most of the ones that you've asked, but as always, if you do have any questions, feel free to ask in the chat window, and we'll make sure that we pause between each of the topics. So anything that you want to discuss at greater length, feel free to jump in. Thank you. So Gary, again, for the format today, what I wanted to do is I have a set of questions, and I know, again, that we've gone back and forth on coming up with a general outline for our discussion. So I'm going to ask these questions, and then, please feel free to answer, take the floor, and then, as I said, if there are any questions, we'll jump in, or if I have any questions for you, we'll start, go from there. So just to get things started, we'd love to hear a little bit about your company, who your typical client is, and what services you're offering.
Sure. The services we offer primarily is web design. We specialize in Joomla, CMS, and we also do everything from branding to graphic design, pay-per-click, and SEO. So we kind of cover every part of digital marketing. And for the most part, we're always trying to get the client in on a package, ideally, as opposed to an individual service. So that's pretty much almost always our business model. And because we basically figure the more hooks we can get in different angles, the longer we're going to keep that client, because we're giving them more reasons to not look elsewhere for their services. As far as the types of clients that we have, it's predominantly in the home improvement business. However, we do service a lot of small businesses such as, dentists, a couple of nonprofits, and several restaurants. But the bulk of our clients that we're using HubShop for is in the home improvement business, and those companies range in size from small regional to a couple that are actually covering the whole Eastern Seaboard.
Excellent, cool. And maybe give me a little background and then how you started your business, what your background is, how you got into digital marketing, web design, the other things you just talked about.
Well, me personally, I've been doing it for about 5 years now, and I started working with a local web company, and where I learned Joomla, and then slowly got into doing the digital marketing side. My experience prior to that, believe it or not, is actually in the salon and spa business. My mother actually had a franchise operation where we had like over 60 franchises in 8 different states that were using her name, and I basically managed the marketing part of that business and the management part of it. So I was always involved in online marketing and managing going back over 10 years, and I decided to take a big turn and changed industries about 5 years ago, and just went 100% into web design and digital marketing.
Great.
So that's pretty much where I came from.
Okay, thanks for that. Well, I know a lot of people have a lot of questions, and again, just the typical client that we work with, or reseller we work with, some come in and are just getting started, some have gotten their first 5 or 10 clients and are looking to grow more. So we always like in these sessions to talk a little bit about how you got started, how you got your first 5 clients specifically, and then we'll talk in the next couple slides about growing from there. So how did you get your first 5 or so clients? What tactics did you use there?
It was entirely local networking, and basically just reaching out to businesses that I already had relationships with, regardless of what that relationship was. And we just started getting the word out there once we had the website set up, and just started talking to people, letting them know what our services are. And the main thing that we were doing is we weren't really going after the the end user client, so to speak, in the beginning. We were really focusing a lot of trying to establish relationships with people that are in our industry, which would be videographers, photographers, writers, and PR companies. PR companies or small PR firms are ideal because they rarely offer web design or digital marketing as a service. So they have a steady stream of clients already in place, and it's just a matter of them believing that you know what you're doing. So we spent a lot of time with those meetings, probably did about 12 or 15 meetings in the first 30 days just with that type of person, just to get the relationships going. And once we did that, the referrals started coming in. The other thing that we did that was critical is when we were talking to all these writers and photographers and people that are kind of in our industry, if we ever found an opportunity just to help them or consult them in any way, we jumped on that, and then that kind of leaves a little psychological way for them to kind of give back a little bit, for help, and which helps them recommend us versus the next person down the street. So that's really how we started, and we've continued that process, just not as much because we have enough referrals coming in right now. But that's pretty much how we did it.
So Gary, that's a great thing. I know one of the top issues that we had in our survey that we did back in December was lead flow. That's always a really critical thing, and obviously so critical for getting your business going and growing it. Just out of curiosity, so when it sounds like some of these people that you went out and networked with and built your referral network were people that you knew, but of these PR firms and people you were reaching out to, did you have to do any cold calling or cold introductions? Tell us a little bit about that process, because we know no one really loves cold calling. What did you do to overcome any issues? Doesn't sound like you were a sales guy as your primary background, so how did you overcome that, and what did you do there?
Yeah, not at all. Fortunately, I had a partner that had a fairly good LinkedIn list, and if you've got a partner that's been in the local market for a long time, a partner that turned out to be my wife in the long term, and she's been she was in the industry for for 20 years doing graphic design, so she had a lot of relationships going. And if you don't have somebody like that, basically what I would recommend is to go out and find somebody that you can get close to that has a long-standing relationship, that's got a good, strong social network. And the reason I say that is because we basically did is once we identified, like for example, we wanted to go after a couple local PR companies. And so the first thing we do is we find out who the owners are, and then we're just looking for connections, primarily on LinkedIn and possibly on Facebook, and just finding where can we get a little connection, and who knows who, and we use that to make the contact. So when we were calling them up, it wasn't necessarily a cold call. We're basically saying, okay, we were referred to you by so-and-so. That essentially was a social connection, maybe once or twice removed, and that made it so much easier to get in the front door, because I do hate cold calling. So we're always trying to use that angle, to get our foot in the door. And once we do, and we have that initial call or conversation, then it's just a process from that point.
Great. Now, I also noticed in some of your notes here, just in terms of getting started, how important was, you had here something about building a great website and content and newsletters. How important do you think that was in establishing or building your credibility with these people? So you had the meeting. What was the proof that was sort of in the pudding that you knew what you were talking about?
Well, the portfolio and the website was critical, because that's generally the first thing almost anybody does. They're going to look you up online, and they want to see what our website looks like if we're talking about web design, or they want to see how we're connected socially. And like for branding and graphic design, and as we started to do the websites, they want to see what kind of work you've done, and we just want to refer them to the website. So that was important. And I tell you that the first 5 websites were the hardest to get, because before that 5, we didn't have any to really show. So we had to be very aggressive and try to be even discounted a little bit just to get those first few sales. But once we had those first 5 to point to, then it became much easier, because we basically were building our portfolio. So the first 6 months was quite a bit of work, to get through that point, and we even did a couple freebie websites for a couple of nonprofits, and just to use them basically as a portfolio. We sometimes, if we did get a referral out of it, that would be great, but we knew we were doing it just to build a portfolio.
Great, thanks. So we wanted to kind of move on after you identified those first couple of clients into how you close deals. And I think, specifically, SEO and other online marketing services, that there's clearly you've got to convince people of the ROI. So what are some of the things that you do to sort of get people to understand the value of SEO, the value of online marketing, of even making an investment in your website? What are some of the things that you do? How do you discuss that with them to actually get them to close that deal?
Yep. The key thing is, the first thing we're trying to do, even before we meet with a client the first time, is trying to figure out, what is their pricing model and what is their average ticket, which isn't always easy to tell, but you can kind of guesstimate what it's going to be before you get in there. So, for example, if you're talking to, a dentist, the lifetime value of a client, or even the annual value of a client, is going to be several $1,000s. And, just by talking to your own dentist, we, basically just ask them the question, what's the client worth to you? And we find out what that number is, and you can also research that information online pretty readily, regardless of what the niche is. So it's critical to evaluate that, because if the client has a very low price point or a very low margin, then we question whether we even want to meet with that person in the first place, because if their margin's not high enough or their average ticket's not high enough, it's going to be very difficult to sell them on an SEO package. Website, yes. SEO is going to be hard. So, we're basically doing our homework to figure out what that number is. And once we know what that number is, then what I would do is get on the phone, with our rep there at HubShot and say, okay, this is the client that I've got. This is what I think his average ticket is. Let's figure out, what threshold we can get to as far as a cost per lead or a cost per acquisition. And once I've got that data, then we can sit down with the client and talk numbers and say, here's, what your cost per lead could be, and, based on your value. And then it's easy to just run the numbers and convince them from that standpoint.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, and I think just for those people on the phone, the last webinar we did was on the ROI of SEO, and some of the stuff that, Gary, you were just talking about is so critical, because there really is that period in the first few months, and we're going to get to this sort of next part of it. But in those first few months, basically you've got to have someone who can really trust you and understands that in the long run, this program is going to work for them. But those first few months, they're paying money and probably not seeing a lot of results.
Yeah, and I can even give you like one example, like one of the bigger clients.
Yeah, sure.
I know one of the questions that comes up is people, as far as price point and sticker shock, and and if we pick on like our top client, we sold them on a $5,000 SEO package, and they're also doing pay-per-click on top of that. So we basically marked up, marked it up quite a bit. But for this company, because they're large, and because we were able to demonstrate, you can get a significant number of leads coming through. So I know with these guys that they're organic. SEO cost per lead is always between $2.50 and $3, and they're averaging between 1,100 and 1,300 leads per month. So it's significant. So for them, having an SEO cost of $5,000 compared to the value of what those leads are, is next to nothing. And all we're doing is we're calculating. Okay, we know how many form fills and how many calls came in organically, which we do through the tracking through HubShot. And we divide that number into the total cost that we're charging, and then we say, here's your cost per lead based on your SEO. And that number, once they see that number, we keep them fixated on that cost, and then they quickly forget about the overall cost, because really what they need to focus on is that cost per lead or cost per acquisition.
Right. No, that's great. Yeah, and I think I know the client you're talking about, and it certainly is an impressive ROI story. And it is kind of interesting because, oftentimes you do see that these clients with the larger budgets that will have larger marketing budgets and can make the investment, they do tend to see the higher, faster returns. Certainly it's because they usually have a diversified online marketing program, so they're doing lots of things, which we talked about this many times. The more diversified your program is, it actually helps your SEO, right? If you have a good PR program, you have other things happening, all that stuff, when you add in a focused SEO program, can really just make the results come in really fast. But the other thing that's interesting is then you compare that to the guy that has a $250 a month budget, and it's always tricky, because that guy, he needs to spend more money, but getting him to spend it, I think you were sort of talking about this earlier, the way that you approach getting into the value of a customer, hopefully can make him understand that being penny wise, under investing in it can actually be, in many cases, just can actually hurt you because you don't ever get the results that someone who has the bigger budget can actually invest in.
Yeah, exactly. And and this particular client that we're referring to, we've had him for it's actually going to be a year this month. So we've had them for 12 months. They're very happy. And I can tell you the one thing that we continue to do with this client and also with everybody else is we're always, comparing, basically do a monthly report and show them what is your organic increase in traffic over last year. So if your, traffic was, organic traffic was 1,000, for last February, and it was 1,300 for this February of this year, then you've got a 30% increase. And with these guys in particular, and this is because of the work that with the SEO program that you guys are doing, we have consistently been between on the low side 37-38%, and on the high side there's been a couple months where we were as much as 50% over the same period from the previous year for organic traffic. And as long as they keep seeing that increase, they're happy campers.
It's music to my ears. That's great. And I'm sure to yours too.
Oh, yeah.
Well, let's talk about some of the things, though, that, in terms of growing, and you talked about some of your big clients, but once you got past that initial, when you were building your business, once you got past the first 5 clients that you were cutting deals with, just trying to get a portfolio built up, what are some of the things you're doing now? And it sounded like earlier you were saying that, you got plenty of referrals coming in, which is awesome because I think, again, many people on the phone are looking for more referrals. But what are some of the things you're doing now to continue to build your business to the next level?
Well, we're continuing to do the same thing we did in the beginning as far as, we're always looking for building more professional relationships that are kind of in our same industry as far as marketing and advertising is concerned. So we haven't stopped doing that. But what we, have continued to do more and more is to stay focused on our own website, our own social media presence, how we're ranking, with our keywords, and probably most importantly is being sure that we're getting some information out there, content marketing, that's coming from us on a regular basis, and building our newsletter, and trying to constantly build our email database and get the information out, because every time we're not like entirely 100% consistent with getting out a newsletter every single month, but whenever we do send it out, we almost always get some kind of a result. It might be a little one, it might be a big one, but I think the email newsletter still pulls everything together and just keeps us in contact with everybody, and that's probably been the number one thing that I can point to, like maybe for the past 6 months.
Now, so are you saying you have a kind of a specific partner list? So there's your end clients, and there's obviously upselling, cross-selling them. But are you saying you're using this newsletter to send out to your partners to keep them sort of top of mind, or to keep you top of mind with them? Is that what you're doing?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Yeah, that's a really interesting. That's interesting. So, and what kind of stuff are you telling them? Is it just basic industry news, or is there anything in particular? How do you approach that? What are the messages you include in that content?
There's 3 things that we're always focusing on. One of them is we try to do some kind of industry news. Like, for example, the big news of today obviously is Google's update on next month, and if your website's not responsive, you're in big trouble. So that's actually helping us to sell responsive websites right now. So we're trying to always one nugget about whatever the current hot industry topic is. Then we're always featuring 1 or 2 of our clients that we recently did work on. So we talk about that client, show the work that we did, do a couple links to our portfolio so they can see, okay, this is the latest thing that we did, as long as we can show it graphically. And then the other thing that we're constantly doing is we really focus a lot on giving back. And this it's a lot of work, but it's had a lot of, it's come back to us tenfold, because we basically donate our time for there's like one local charity that we do all of their digital work for nothing, and it's quite a bit of work. But how that's helped to get our name out there in the community, and the connections that it's made as a result has been, has worked really, really well. And because it's put us in touch with people that we would have otherwise never come across. And we're always constantly, like, encouraging other local small businesses, to give back. Because, like, where we're located down here in Florida, in our city, I just did this research actually just this last week. We've got about 1,500 nonprofits, and there's about 45,000 local small businesses. So that's like an 18 or 19 to 1 ratio. So we're basically just always pushing the idea of giving back, and every local small business helping some charity or some nonprofit, and we're always looking at it from that angle. So those are kind of the 3 things that we're always going after. And yes, we do have like emails that we send out to the partner vendors, people, so to speak, and then one that's slightly different that we send out to prospective clients.
That's interesting. And Adam, I see we have a question. Do you want to field that question?
Yeah, we did have one come in that we wanted to hit here. Question was this: do you offer any sort of payment or program for referrals?
Yes, we do. We're staying right around 15%. So, regardless of the package, whether it's a website or an SEO package, we always keep that in mind, where we build into our pricing a 15% cushion in case we need to use it for a referral. And, so if it's like a website sale or like a branding sale, then that's a one-time thing. But we're really going after the retainer clients, and we're willing to give up 15% for a full 12 months if somebody brings us that type of client. So we basically build that into our pricing.
Great, excellent, thank you.
Great, and just a plug here. I mean, it sounds like you're not using it, but just for anybody on the phone today, we do produce. Ellen, who might be on the phone as well, listening here, one of our team members in the marketing department puts together a monthly, what we call our Search News newsletter, and we offer that up to anybody. We kind of take the similar approach, Gary. It's a little bit different because we can't obviously profile a client given that we're white labeling our services, but we try to have industry news trend. We try to hit one in SEO, one in paid search, maybe one in social, maybe email if something's hot that month in email. And again, it's a proactive touch point. We're primarily sending that out to the clients that are on our platform if you opt into that, but the actual content would make a perfect partner type of email. And one other comment, that the April 21st deadline for anybody in the web design business is like the best gift Google's probably ever given anybody, because it's actually, it's amazing that they've actually put a date on it, but it's awesome for web designers.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's jump into after you sell that client. We know that in this business and the recurring revenue, that retention is so critical. So what are some of the things that you're doing to retain clients, and then specifically, what are some of the things you're doing in those first 90 to 120 days, where we're in that period of there's a lot of inputs, a lot of activities, but not a lot of results and things happening in the first 90 to 20 days as things start to take effect. What are you doing to retain clients? How are you addressing those first 90 to 120 days?
The one thing that we do is especially in the beginning, is we want to be sure that the client thoroughly understands the process, and we want to get them right into the dashboard and get them active with that. And if we don't basically hold their hand and walk them through it the first time, we generally find that they will rarely go back and do it on their own. So we basically will get on either meet with the client directly or do a join me session, and walk them through and say, look, here's the dashboard, here's your user, here's the reports you're going to get. We want to be sure that they're getting the weekly and the monthly reports that the dashboard generates, and then we also do some additional reports on top of that that are basically just simple spreadsheets where we're keeping track of about 14 or 15 different metrics depending on the client, and we're essentially just here's your metrics for for January, February, March, and just keep them all in a month to month. And once we've had a client for more than 12 months, then we can do that year-over-year comparison. And we generally find that's what most people care about, because unless you're comparing to the same period of the previous year, you can't really do a true comparison because of the seasonality that every business has. So we really focus on the portal, and we kind of go overboard with the reporting, and to be sure that they've got more than enough data, to back up what they're doing. And so we're always looking for all the different data points that are out there. I can almost always find something that's positive. It's not always going to be positive, especially during the first 3 months, but there's generally almost always something that we can point to, that we can say, look, your page views went up, or your bounce rate went down, or you've got more ranking for for this set of keywords, whatever it is. So we kind of be sure that we're capturing a lot of data points on a regular basis. So we've always got kind of a story to tell the client, and that's what they're looking for. Is they just want to know that something is going in the right direction, if not everything, and that usually gets them through the first 90 days. After that, it's just a process.
So one of the things that your account manager talked about and sort of complimented you on is that you're very good at looking at things and not overreacting to small blips along the way. So I wanted to maybe just to first of all acknowledge that and say that we definitely agree with that, but also get your perspective and specifically that you look at 30 and 60-day trends, which is very much what you're just saying, versus if a ranking were, for example, to dip down on one day, that it's not a crisis. It's just one data point. So give us a little. Sometimes that's hard to do when clients are on the phone calling you. Give us a little perspective on how you manage the client and what your perspective and how you look at analyzing data and reporting information out.
I think one of the most important things is to get ahead of the client. So if you're on top of the reporting and the data, the way that we should be, you're looking at the information on a regular basis, and if there is something negative, you're probably most times are going to spot it before the client does. So when I do spot what I would consider to be a negative situation, then I really, number one, that tells me I need to put a little bit more energy into that account and figure out what's going on, and then I would get on the phone with with our sales rep and say, look, this, and I've done this a few times, is like, this client, I'm just struggling with them in this particular area. What can we do, or let's try to figure out what's going on. And once we do that, we can usually come up with, okay, here's our to-do list that we're doing specifically to address this particular problem. And as long as the client sees that we're working on it, even if it's a negative result, they just want to see that, okay, well, our rankings dropped or our traffic dropped, what are you doing about it? And as long as we can give them a little bit of an action plan and say, this is the steps that we're taking, and as we all know, SEO is totally a moving target, so we're always adjusting what we're doing. But I think it's just letting them know and communicating with them, here's what we're doing, we recognize here's what is happening here, and give them a plan and then move forward.
Okay, that's great. Thanks. Okay, so we're going to move into then just some couple final questions here. One of them was just around how you stay up to date. So what tools do you use to make sure that you're, I guess, first of all, how important do you see it being that you're sort of up to speed in the industry trends? Probably I could guess your answer, but I'll ask it anyway. And then secondly, what do you do to stay up to date? What kinds of publications do you read? What kinds of things do you use? Any of the HubShout resources? What do you do there?
I'm pretty much an avid. I mean, I think I learn something new just almost, if not every week, or I'm sorry, if not every day, definitely on a weekly basis. So I'm constantly reading. There's several blogs that I follow. Of course, I go through and and read all the blogs that HubShout puts out, and I go through all the videos and make sure that I get on the webinars when I can or listen to the replays, because I'm always picking up some little new thing that I that I didn't know before. Or it gives me an idea to try something new or different with a client. But I generally follow a lot of the major the major blogs like Search Engine Journal and like Blumenthal, for example, are a couple that come to mind. And and I get on a lot of lists, and I have a lot of mail as a result of it. But I'm not afraid to get that mail, and I subscribe to certain companies through Facebook where I get their notifications. So I'm always looking for companies that have anything to do with organic SEO or digital marketing, and just looking for new information that's coming out. Because once we do see something new, like obviously, we know about what Google's doing. The average business owner isn't going to find out about that until after the fact. But now we've got that little nugget of information that we can get right out there to our clients and say, look, this is what's happening. And that just reinforces to them that we're staying on top of our game and that we're basically plugged in. So it's just really, following several companies, going through the headlines, and just trying to digest and figure out what's relevant and what's not relevant.
Excellent. And just out of curiosity, we've talked about this April 21st deadline coming up with the mobile-friendly optimization. Have you actually been able to use that news to close any deals or to get any new leads in?
We actually just finished putting together an email today that is letting people know here's what's going on, because we've got probably about, I'd say 60% of our current websites that are older websites are not responsive. And so what we did is we put together a newsletter, and these are clients that we've been trying to upgrade for quite some time, but now we've got an awesome reason to do so, is to give them this information and say, hey, here's the snippet, that here's Google's words, and here's what's happening. And so basically what we're doing is we're pointing out this is happening on the 21st. Google is blatantly telling us that the traffic's going to drop for mobile. And by the way, we track your analytics all the time, so we know that you're averaging between 30 and 40% in your mobile traffic from the analytics, so we can easily show them that. And from that point, it's a no-brainer. Then we're just either talking them into, here's a monthly plan. We'll upgrade your website for X number of dollars per month for the next 12 months, or here's a flat price, and go from there. So we actually just put that together, and I know that we're going to easily close probably half a dozen of them, within the next 10 days, because they're going to be, these business owners are going to be terrified of losing traffic. They always are.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fantastic thing. And again, I think for everybody who's out there listening to this, if you haven't, I think the approach you're taking is really great, especially with that analytics data, because you can really quantify what it is. I mean, a lot of people just still don't, even though I think I read something on Greg Sterling's blog the other day that he was posting about that finally we've reached a tipping point for local search traffic, where now it's more mobile than it is from desktop. But I think a lot of small businesses owners don't even know that. They just don't know that people are so mobile in their patterns. So that's a fantastic one. And everyone here hopefully can use that as a great way to close some business. One final slide that we have is just on running your business. And I know we get a lot of questions in. Sometimes people ask me, what are we using for invoicing? And we've built a lot of our own tools. But I know I wanted to ask you just, what do you use for invoicing, contracting, getting people to sign contracts, CRM. So just maybe share with us some of the things you're doing to keep yourself organized, to run your business, and I'm sure everyone will be really interested in that.
Sure. For invoicing and billing and credit card payments, we're using QuickBooks Online for all three. I love QuickBooks Online. It's really convenient. The billing is easy. The credit card is easy. Their discount rate I think is competitive with a lot of the other big ones that are out there, like Square or your typical merchant processor. But QuickBooks has made it very easy to get a merchant account, probably almost too easy. And you get approved almost immediately. You put the credit card information in, and then once we've got the client information or the credit card information from the client, we put it into the system. It saves it in there, so then we just invoice them at the beginning of the month and bill them and get the payment right away. So it's automated. And what we do with that is, we basically have the client, actually fill out a paper form authorizing us to do that. So that's critical that you've got that if you're going to do automated credit card billing, for that. But once you've got that in place, it's easy, and and that keeps the cash flow going. So for all the bookkeeping, we use QuickBooks. For contracts, we basically, we have a set contract that we modify on a client-by-client basis, but basically we do everything with Google Docs. We, put together the contract, or basically we have our contract and proposal are essentially the same document, and we set it up that way, and we just, do it in Google Docs, modify it based on what the client's going to get or what we're proposing to them, and they can immediately sign off on it, scan it, send it back to us, and that's how we have the contract set up.
Excellent. And then you've mentioned you have sales teams and you have different people involved in the process. Do you have anything that manages their pipeline or their contacts plans? Anything there?
Well, you're talking about a CRM. For a CRM, I've been bouncing back and forth between CRMs, and I'm still not settled on which one to really engage with. So I can't really give a recommendation there. But for project management, which to me is crucial, because once you've got the client going, you've got a X number of steps that you've got to get done, and we would not be able to survive without our project management tool, because I can't remember everything. But basically, the one that we, and I know there's a lot of them that are out there, but the one that we use is called MavenLink, and it's very affordable. It's a great tool, and you can use it internally, and you can use it even with your clients if you choose to. But I think it's fairly easy to use. Its price point is good, and I think it's one of the better ones out there for project management.
Okay, great. And Adam, looks like we have a couple other questions here.
Yeah, one that just popped in. Well, there was one about CRM, which I think Gary just covered, but the other one here is, do you have a specific proposal process you're using to close deals?
Once we've met with the client, we basically will tell them that we're going to get them back a proposal, usually within 48 hours, and then we'll get it back to them within 24 hours. I'm always trying to, I know it's repetitive, but under promise and over deliver. And so we basically that's what we use to tell them that. But once we have the information, we come back from the meeting, whether it's on the phone or in person, put the proposal together, and because we've got a standard proposal pretty much already in process, all we have to do is go in there and just change the line item and what the terms are going to be. So we can generally turn around the proposal by modifying that one standard template that we have, within 10 to 15 minutes, and then send it out to the client. And then we'll send it to them. We'll follow up with the client if needed, the very next day to be sure that they received it, do they have any questions, and then go from there. And we're fortunately, we have a pretty good closure rate. I'd say probably 70% right now, and we try to keep that part as simple as possible.
That's fantastic. 70% is amazing. Is there any tricks or secrets there that you use to, because obviously writing proposals is a time commitment, but to be able to close 70% is awesome. What are you doing to make that happen?
I think the meeting that we're having with the client beforehand and really doing our homework is a big part of that, because there's been many times where, we've come across a potential client and I do a little bit of research and I say, this client's not for us. And I don't try to sell everybody that we come across or every potential lead. We're really picky with that. It was very hard for us to be picky in the beginning, but once you start to have a client flow going, I think that's critical, because we didn't have 70% closure rate a year and a half ago. So we've just gotten we just become more selective. So I would say it's a combination of that and really doing your homework. And once you get in there to the client, and I think the dashboard, one of the things that's really helped tremendously is by going through a demonstration. We haven't even talked about this. By doing a demonstration of the dashboard, and I actually use, and I know you got to be careful with this, but I actually use an existing client. So I'll just get approval or permission from other clients that are already in the system and say, look, I would just like to use the dashboard and get your approval. And I generally haven't had a problem with that. But once somebody sees that in action and they see the transparency of it, if they're not sold right there on the spot, generally it's just a matter of money and budget. But that's been probably the one thing that I can attribute, having that higher closure rate to, is that demonstration. I think that's critical.
And just want to confirm, we did not pay you to say that, right?
Yeah, absolutely not. But if I didn't have that, it would be it would be much more harder to close it, because it's almost to the point where the business owner, if they say no, they're just crazy, because you're showing them in black and white. Here's the steps. Here's how it's going to work. Here's an example. The transparency is critical. Once they see that, they really get they settle down quite a bit, because in the past, before we used a system like that you've got in place, the biggest problem was that SEO was a black box. And with the dashboard and the way you have the system set up, it's not a black box. And that's what makes it so much easier to sell.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, thanks for that, Gary. Just one follow-up. Someone was asking if you could articulate a little bit about what criteria you use for deciding, who is a good client or not a good client. What are some of the signs you can see that have helped you bring your close rate up so well?
The most important thing would be their average ticket, or what it is they're trying to sell, like their business model. Like, I can't stand realtors. I will run away from a realtor in a heartbeat. And or if they've got a really low ticket item, or if it's obvious they've got a very low profit margin, they're just really hard to sell. So that's the first thing that I take a look at. The second thing that I do is I'm always, once I have a potential client or I find out this person's interested, or whether it's a referral or whether they contact us online, we immediately go and find out what is the digital landscape for this client. How badly do they need us? How bad is their website? What does their social media look like? So we're constantly looking for how many pain points can we shove in their face and show them that you're missing out on all this stuff because of this, and this. So if I come across a client that it has a great online presence and it doesn't have a I might think twice about whether we want to even pitch them or not. If we can't obviously see that we can improve their their digital landscape, then we may or may not decide to to go after it.
That's great.
Gary, that's excellent. That's excellent. Just two comments. One is, I think the idea of not chasing bad deals and really heavily qualifying and working on closing, bringing up that close rate for people who are highly qualified is really a best practice. So to hear you talk about it, it's excellent, I think, for the other resellers on the phone. And then the other comment is, we talk, with the whole Help Shout team that's in the room with me today, we talk about getting results for you, and then by extension for your end client, how we all get paid all the time. I mean, every day. I mean, we draw deep inspiration from the fact that we're able to help these Main Street customers. But that's me talking. So to hear you talk about it in the first person, that I drive out and I sit down and I'm able to show them year over year their traffic's up 25 or 30%. It's just really exciting, Gary, and I just really want to express my appreciation for you taking the time to do this, not only for the other resellers who can benefit, but also for our team to hear this. So thanks very much. And those close out the questions, Chad.
Great, thanks. Yeah, and Gary, well, thanks again for it. We don't have any other questions here. I mean, I think actually there's only one other comment, and I was looking at some notes from that Jamie left me here. I mean, he said there was one other moment or one other thing that you do, which he said that you try to take interactions and turn them into teachable moments. So I'm not sure if those are your words or his words, but I wanted to just hear a little bit about that process and what you do there.
Yeah, that's a great point. Because I do talk to Jamie about this quite often. I think one of the things that once I've had a client for 6 months or 12 months or longer, if you were to go back and talk to them and ask them what is one of the best values, they're generally going to come back and say it's the education that we gave them. So a lot of times some clients will ask you 100 questions. And, like I recently had a dentist, and she's got all kinds of Facebook questions, nothing to do with her SEO campaign, but she wants to focus on Facebook. So what we do is, we take the questions and turn it around and basically look, okay, well, let's talk about Facebook and let's go through an educational process. And in this case, it actually turned into us doing another little add-on service, and we're now going to start managing her Facebook ads. But we're always trying to educate them, just in how does stuff work, what is working in today's world, and whether it's social media or SEO or on-page SEO or on-page optimization, and just always trying to go through one or two things with them just to say this is how it works and this is why it works. And when they understand that, then the whole world of SEO and digital marketing becomes less and less of a black box and more understandable. And what I generally find happening is the clients actually look forward to that next meeting because they know they're going to learn something. So I always try to be, I read so much stuff that there's always something that I can talk about, but I generally would try to take baby steps with them at each meeting and take them deeper and deeper into the process so that they really understand the mechanics of why we do it the way that we do it and why it works. And that's what they like, and I find that really helps to keep the client long term.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. I think that's I agree with you. I think that's a fantastic way of building that strong relationship, and even if it is for retention or for upselling, it's just very powerful. So again, thank you very much for taking the time to prepare your thoughts and to share them with everyone here. I know that we've gotten a lot of positive feedback from our other Ask a Reseller series, and again, we're just really happy to have you here. Happy to hear again all the things that you're doing that are really great, and also I think for everyone on the phone, it's inspirational to hear that the opportunities are out there, and you've given us some real solid tips on how to maybe go get some of them. So thanks again, and thank you everyone. Have a great afternoon.
You too. Thank you.
Take care.